so I can save it. But I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to you and just talk to us and tell us what we need to know. And then you guys be prepared with any questions that you have for Sonya too.
Okay, so good morning. Thanks for having me. My name is Sonya Edens. I'm with RSC Engineering. We're a local company here in Hampstead. We do work in New Hanover, Brunswick, Onslow, Pender, Duplin, Columbus, Carteret County. So we have a pretty wide reach. We do a lot of different things, but to focus on septic today, we do time of sale inspections where if you have a buyer that's buying a home, we can certainly come out and inspect that system for you and give you kind of a point of sale of what that system's doing at that day and time, the performance of that system. We also do new installations. We do repairs. So if you have a inspection and for some reason there should be an issue with it, we can help you or your clients through the permitting process if a permit's required for those repairs. And then we can also help physically do those repairs. And then we also do maintenance. There are some systems that require an operator or a licensed subsurface agreement if they're a higher end system, and we are licensed to hold those contracts as well. So we do that as well for customers. So in the septic world, kind of the things, on the permitting side in North Carolina, you have it's a 3-step permit. You have an improvement permit, which a lot of people refer to as a perk test. And so if you're buying a lot or you've got a customer that's buying a lot and they want to know, does it perk or not? Then typically that's going to be your improvement permit. Usually your improvement permit is good for 5 years, and it will tell you that the lot is suitable for a specific number of bedrooms. It will tell you what type of system. So we'll know, is it a conventional system? Is it a pump system? Is it a low pressure pipe, or even one of these that requires an operator like we talked about? And then it will tell you general location of where that's going. So the improvement permit is kind of a thumbs up. This is a suitable buildable lot, and people usually that's people all they need in order to proceed with making a purchase or going forward. That's just kind of I would certainly not recommend clients buy property without having some sort of improvement permit, because I have it occasionally people come to me and they'll say, hey, we bought this lot and we have no permit for it. And then if it's not permittable, they may not have a buildable lot. And that's a predicament to be in that most people are, especially if they were planning to build a home there or do something with it. So certainly obtaining an improvement permit or getting some information about a lot is wise before moving forward with it. The second part of the permit is called the construction authorization. That's a CA, is what you hear a lot of people talk about. So your construction authorization is what is needed in order for a client to pull building permits and start the building process on the lot. So you kind of got your perk test with your improvement permit, where you start, what is it good for, and what kind of system you've got. And then your construction authorization gives you more details. It's going to give you more information about the system, exact dimensions and locations. Typically, your construction authorizations are not obtained until you're a little closer to the building process. You've got exactly what building plan that you want to build, where you want to put it on the lot. You can show that it's not going to be in conflict with your septic, that kind of thing. That's what we need as an installer to come put that system in for you. And then after it's installed, then your installer will call the county to have an inspection done, and they will issue the operations permit. That's your third and final. That means your septic's been inspected. It's good to go. We cover it up and you're good at that point. Your operations permit is what, and I don't know how much new construction you all do or involved in that, but the operations permit is where your builders are trying to call for a CO and they can't get the CO. They've got a mechanical final and a plumbing final and electrical final, but they can't, the zoning won't schedule their CO. And it's because they don't have the operations permit on their septic system for some reason. So, it's often, it's forgotten and not thought about, but it's very important. We keep those out when we do installs, and we make sure we get all of our OPs before we file them away, because I don't want a builder calling me 2 months trying to get their CO and they can't because we don't have their septic operations permit. So really, it's an IP, your improvement permit, your construction authorization or CA, and then your OP or your operations permit. So that's kind of the permitting end of things. Do you want me to talk a little bit about what kinds of septic systems are out there, and like maybe just some general budget information so people have, if you hear this information, it might be familiar to you? Is that helpful? I mean, I don't want to bore you with septic that you don't have an interest in. Septic's not terribly exciting as it is, but everybody's got to have it if you need it. So kind of the most basic system would be a conventional septic system. So used to it was an old rock and trench. You'd have a 3-foot wide trench, you'd have rock in it, and you'd have a 4-inch pipe in your trench. That's old style conventional septic. Not many people do rock anymore because of the cost and the labor intensiveness of rock. There are some that still do rock. It's really typically builder preferred or homeowner preferred. Most people use either polystyrene or chambers. Those are also, they're loosely called conventional systems. North Carolina gives an approval for a 25% reduction for those systems. So if you had a permit that calls for a rock trench system and it's got 4 50-foot lines, you could go in there and install either chambers or polystyrene and put in 3 50-foot lines. You can automatically take a 25% reduction by using that product. We use, and chambers versus polystyrene is sort of like Ford versus Chevrolet. It's a total personal preference, installer preference. We prefer poly. We've just had better luck with poly. We see less repairs on poly than the chambers, but you know, every installer has their own preference, and they'll give you a story as to why they like one better than the other. They're both North Carolina approved, cost effective. They're about the same, tit for tat. So there's not a big advantage to one over the other. But we use probably poly in 85 to 90% of our septic systems. It's a much more cost-effective product. It's easier to handle than rock, and so we use a lot of it. Even if the permit's not written for the reduction, we would still use that product. May not take the reduction when they put the full amount in, but we would use that in lieu of rock. Just a conventional 3-bedroom poly system probably runs $3,500 to $4,000, depending on how many drain lines, how long they are, that kind of thing, depending on what size your tank is. Now, if you have to pump that system, so let's say, for example, we get there to install it and our permit's written for a gravity system, and I've got 18-inch trench bottoms, and I'm going to go install a 1,000-gallon septic tank and 3 50-foot poly lines. And I get there and the plumber's brought the plumbing out, and the plumbing is 2 feet in the ground. Well, I can't make gravity work. I can't make it flow downhill if the plumbing outlet is 24 inches below grade and my trench bottoms on my permit are only 18 inches below grade. Because I have to get from that plumbing outlet pipe, that 4-inch pipe coming out of the home, I have to get from that to the septic tank. So I have to have fall. The plumber does that, but I have to get the plumber fall. So I have to set my septic tank deep enough so the plumber has fall. You lose 1 inch across your septic tank. You come out of your septic tank and you go to a D-box, and then your D-box to your drain lines. So if you're in that situation and you can't make gravity fall, then what we're going to have to do is pump it. So at that point, we would add a pump system to it. And a pump system would look like you'd have a 1,000-gallon septic tank. All of this is 3 to 4 bedrooms. If we go higher than that, your tankage gets a little bit bigger. But so if you had a 1,000-gallon septic tank, and then you have a 1,000-gallon pump tank, and then in your pump tank, you'd have a pump with your floats, and you have a control panel that's mounted either on the side of the house, or sometimes they mount it on a 4x4 in the yard, depending on where the homeowner wants it. And then you have a 2-inch supply line leaving that pump that is going to go to your drain field. And at that point, instead of using a distribution box, we would use a pressure manifold, which is a like a plastic, like almost looks like a water meter valve box. And we've got a 3-inch pipe coming in. We build our own manifolds, but essentially it's a pressure distribution at that point. So the pump's going to come on, pressurize that 2-inch force main, get to that manifold, and then there's individual taps for every line that the water is going to be pushed out of those taps into those drain lines. So that's a pump system. If you have to add a pump to a system, it's usually around $3,000, $3,200. So now you've got that gravity system I gave you a while ago, $3,500 to $4,000. You get there and the plumber's done you no favors, and your plumbing is 2 feet in the ground. You have to add a pump to it. Then you're adding another $3,000 to get that to a pump system. Some counties require you to change the permit to go to a pump system. Some counties allow you just to modify and add a pump to them. So it depends on what county you are as to whether or not you have to go back through permitting to modify that. From there, there's still other systems. You have a low pressure pipe, which is an LPP system. So it's another modification of a drain field. Your LPP systems typically are going to run $7,500 to $8,500. They're automatically a pump system because it's a low pressure pipe. So you're going to have your drain lines. You're going to have a 4-inch pipe in your drain lines, and then you have an 1.25 inch PVC pipe that goes down the 4-inch pipe. And on that 1.25 inch PVC pipe, where there's holes that are drilled in at different lengths, sizes, etc. And that's all part of the design on an LPP. So an LPP system does require an operator. That's something that I would like for people to know, their agents to know, because I don't like people to buy homes or have permits and then they find out that this operator requirement's on there. Operations on systems typically runs $500 to $600 a year. So if your client has a site that has an improvement permit that's a low pressure pipe or an LPP system on it, you know, one thing they want to think about is it's a little bit more expensive system when I go to build this house and install it. So I'm looking a little bit more money there. But then also I've got to have a maintenance operator for the life of the system. And that's probably going to run $500 to $600 for that system a year. Now, a homeowner can get licensed themselves, or they can attend the classes and they can do their own. Most people do not want to, but that is an option. If they want to try to save some money, that's an option that they can do. But for that service, you know, the things that we do, so we hold probably 200 to 250 operator contracts right now in our surrounding area. And when we go out, what we're doing is we're opening your septic tank, pulling the filter if there is one in there, cleaning that filter, looking to see does your tank need to be pumped or not? What does the sludge and the scum level on the inlet side look like? We're going to run your pump, make sure that your pump is running like it's supposed to. We're going to check all your floats, make sure the alarms are working, the visual and the audible alarms are working, make sure the floats are turning the pump on and off like they're supposed to. And then depending on what kind of system it is, if it's a low pressure pipe or a drip system or whatever, there's other things that we do that we're checking at the drain field, some laterals that we might flush out, some filters that it might have in units, depending on what kind of system it is. And then we fill out that report after every visit, and we send it to the homeowner and to the county for their records. So that's a maintenance agreement if you have a system that has to have that. So you kind of got gravity systems, you've got adding a pump to a gravity system, a low pressure pipe system. From there, you might have a panel block system. Panel blocks can be gravity or they can be pump, either one. They're a little bit unique system because they're a very deep system. We don't see as many of them around here because we usually run into a soil wetness condition at a shallower table. And so we don't have the depth for panel blocks. But panel blocks are great because they give you a very good space reduction. So when you do the math to figure out how much area you need for your system, you actually take 50% of that for a space reduction on a panel block system. So they're a little more expensive, but not terribly much so. And they're really nice systems. So where they're a good fit around here, we use them, but we don't see them a ton just because we don't have the depth with being so close to the coast and the water table being high. From there, usually you'll go into like an anaerobic drip system. Drip systems are typically going to have design done on them and then the installation. And then they have to have a maintenance requirement as well. So your drip system, an anaerobic, there's two different kinds of drip, an anaerobic and an aerobic. An anaerobic does not have pre-treatment with it. So you just have a septic tank and a pump tank. And then you have what's called a hydraulics unit, which has some switching valves in it. And then it's pumping to drip tubing, just about like a water hose. If you think of like a soaker tube for your flower beds or something like that, it's 1/2-inch tubing. They're usually placed 2 foot on centers, about 6 inches in the ground. They'll have little tiny emitters about every 2 feet down the lines of the tubing. So it's a very shallow placed tubing. It's very good for very poor soils because it is not a demand dose system. It's not a system where you're using a bunch of water in your home, it's going through the septic tank, going to the pump tank, your pump's coming on and pushing it to the field. These are systems that are time dose. So your panel has a, part of the design is your panel has a program set up in it that says, all right, I'm gonna dose for 12 minutes and then I'm gonna rest for 2 hours. And then I'm gonna dose for 12 minutes and I'm gonna rest for 2 hours. So it's a constant all the time. It's a very forgiving system. And that it's putting a little bit amount of water out there all the time instead of just overloading it and then backing off and you don't see anything for a day. So drip systems are typically used in very poor soils. An anaerobic drip system is probably in that $15,000 range. And an aerobic, which is pre-treatment required, depending on whether you have UV or not, is typically in that $18,000 to $22,000, $25,000 range. And there are residential homes around here that have all of those. I mean, we're seeing more and more of them because more and more of the good property is getting gone. And this is what we're left with. Let's see, those are kind of the different kinds of systems. We've talked about maintenance contracts. Anything, I'm trying to think if there's anything specific we could talk about, any questions you might have, or does anybody questions about how septic works?
Juliana has a question.
Hey,
okay.
A generic question, but there are some things that we can tell clients that are opposed to septic systems, because I have a lot of clients that say, I want a house, but I don't want septic.
Yeah.
what would you, I'm having a hard time hearing you. What would you tell a client that says they don't want septic? Is that your question?
Yeah. What are some like selling points for a septic system? Because we get that objection a lot.
Yeah. I think that probably if you don't have septic, then you've got sewer. If you've got sewer, then you've got a monthly bill. So, there's one thing, you don't have a monthly commitment with, unless it's a septic system that does have an operator on it, then obviously, you can say it's an annual payment or break it down to monthly payments. But as long as it's a conventional or just a standard pump system, then you don't have that. And
how long do they typically you're supposed to like last, or people worry about how often they get flushed out?
Rule of thumb on pumping out a tank is every 3 to 5 years. We've been to some tanks that haven't been pumped in 10 years and they're fine. And we've been some that are a year and a half and they need to be pumped. It's very dependent on the customer's usage. And so, if it's a single person living there or an older couple living there, their usage is going to be far different than a family with small children, 3 or 4 small children. So just water usage is a big thing, just not overloading systems. Typically septic systems that are installed properly and that are sited correctly, the soils are called correctly and the systems are installed good, you should get 20 to 30 years out of a septic system. There's no, as long as they're treated properly. And so that brings another point, what do you put down the drain on a septic system? You really shouldn't put anything down the drain on a septic system except just bodily waste and toilet paper. There should be no grease put down the drain. You should wipe plates before you put them in the dishwasher. Garbage disposals are a big no-no with septic systems. People have them all the time. We have one in my personal home, which is on septic, but we don't use it. It's just occasionally turned on just to clean out the bottom of the sink, but we certainly do not put food down the sink. We don't wipe plates in the sink. That food and grease, when it gets in your septic system, that grease just congeals in your tank. And so it does not allow the environment of your tank to be the aerobic environment it needs to for the bugs and for the tank breakdown process to happen. Beyond that, if that grease does make it through that tank and it makes it to the D box and into your drain lines, it can start plugging the voids in the soils on your drain lines. And then that's when your drain lines stop taking water like they're supposed to. Then that's when you eventually have failures. So grease is a really bad thing for septic systems. So certainly you don't want to put grease down the drain. I wouldn't flush feminine products. I wouldn't flush condoms. None of that stuff really should be flushed down a toilet. Really just bodily waste and toilet paper is all that should go. No, even wipes, like a lot of them will tell you they're biodegradable. We open up septic tanks all the time and just, they're not doing any justice to the system.
Even if they say septic safe.
Right. So, so you were asking, as far as selling points on septic, it's tough. A lot of times they're just not sewer. I don't know that septic is better than sewer, but sewer is just not available in a lot of areas. And when it's not, septic is your only option. So it's kind of what you have to go with. If they're maintained well and they're properly cared for, then, there's really no good reason to be afraid of them. I certainly would encourage septic inspections to be done on houses when they're being purchased. One thing to keep in mind, if a house they are just a time of sale. They're just what's going on right there at that moment. So if a home has been sitting vacant for 2 months and we go there and we do an inspection, what we see at that moment might not really be a good indication of what you're going to see in a month when a family moves in there. One of the things that we do during our inspections, and I think some other inspectors do as well, is when we open up that distribution box, we're going to, of course, look at the condition, look at how many lines we have, and we do a stress test by running water in that box. So we'll take a water hose and run water at a pretty slow rate and just watch it in that box. And we will cap the lines individually to make sure that each line is taking water like it's supposed to, because you may have 4 lines and only 2 of them are taking. And the people that live there may have never experienced a problem. I mean, they may have never had a problem. So, it's not like they're trying to hide anything. They may not even know. But if only 2 of your lines are taking, then, something's going on with those other 2 lines. It could be roots. It could be grease has gotten in them. It could be dirt in them. It could be the pipe was crushed at installation and they never took, who knows? We don't know why, but we can only report our findings. So that's good information to know. Is that distribution box, does the water move out of that box into those drain lines like it's supposed to, or does it back up? What does it do? Because that's simulating what's going to happen when you start running water in your home and it gets to that D box. Water is and another thing, if that house has been sitting vacant, those drain lines may be very, very dry because they've just been sitting. They haven't had any water put to them in quite some time. So when we come there and do our stress test, those lines may take water just fine. But, you know, we don't know what they're going to do after a home is put on them and you've got a family living there and that kind of thing. So again, it's just a snapshot in time of what our findings are at that time. There's usually evidence. There's usually things that we see. You know, if water's been standing in the D box, you can usually see discoloration and things like that. So we certainly try to indicate that and report back what our findings are. It's helpful too if houses are on water instead of well, because if someone does have a problem with their septic system, your septic is sized by the number of bedrooms. And in North Carolina, it's assigned 120 gallons of bedroom per day. So if you have a 3-bedroom home, it's 360 gallons a day on your permit. 4 bedrooms is 480. Now, the state recommends you only run at about 60% of that because you don't want to run your car wide open every day, but that's, you know, that's there to handle the companies and the ebbs and flows that you may have. So if a house is on water, then you can see what the water usage has been. You can get a water bill and look over the last 30 days, how many, you know, what's the gallons per day. So if you're buying a home and it's on septic and it's also connected to water, it might be helpful to get that water bill to look at what's the water usage been. That way you can see, you know, have they been overusing the septic? Are they, you know, what kind of water are they putting in that septic on a daily basis to know, you know, how's that system been cared for, or has it been overused or not? Now, keep in mind too, sometimes water can be used for swimming pools and washing cars and irrigation and other things like that. So it's not always 100% accurate, but it's another piece of information that we often look at to try to understand the performance of the system.
I have a question about, so I run into you more frequently than not. Are there options for if there is no sewer? I think, is there an above ground? Can you get an above ground septic?
No. There is a mound system. And so it's a mound or a fill pad. You'll hear it called different things. And so essentially the soil wetness condition is not deep enough in the soil. So what they'll do is they'll build up the septic area. So essentially you integrate the soils, you bring soil in, scratch off the grass, get it prepped, bring soil in, integrate that soil, and then build it above ground. So yes, there are some of those. They're usually pretty, depending on how big they are, there's a lot of dirt required, and so they can be expensive. And then they typically are a pump system, because if you think about it, you're trying to get water into something that's uphill, exactly. And so, typically there's a pump associated with a mound system. But yeah, we see a lot of mounds, and sometimes the mounds are so large that we find an anaerobic drip system is a comparable, can be put in the same place, almost tit for tat for install costs. The issue with the anaerobic system is that you have to have a maintenance agreement or an operator, and some people don't want that, whereas a mound you do not. However, if the cost is the same, people may not want a 18 to 20, 24-inch mound in their yard, depending on where it is. So a drip system is all going to be below ground. So those are kind of some of the trade-offs. If you have a permit that calls for that, then a lot of times we'll try to educate the people and talk to them about the different options so they can try to make a decision that's good for them.
So do y'all do perk tests?
We do not do the testing. I can certainly handle the permitting for you. We are not licensed soil scientists, and I do not have a soil scientist on my staff. So if somebody if somebody says, look, I'm getting ready to buy a lot and I want to have, a permit issued, I can help you with the permitting and submit it to the county. We do that for some people. It's not hard, but some people just don't have the time or they don't want to mess with it. So they come to us and we offer that as a service to them. But we do not actually go out and test the soils. We have some soil scientists that we work with, and in probably the last 2 years, that's changed a lot. Used to, if the county was backed up, you could go to a soil scientist and you could pay them as a private consultant, usually pay them $300 to $500. They could go check a site for you and come back and say, yeah, I think the site's good. And just give you kind of a budget of what they think, what kind of system it's going to be, where the system's going to be, that kind of thing. And that was great for people that were trying to make some decisions in a hurry when the county was taking, 4 or 5 weeks to get a permit from. And people were trying to decide whether to make an offer on these lots or, whether to purchase, what to do. Now the soil scientists are so backed up, the county's almost faster than the soil scientists. So, sometimes we find now that we're just submitting straight to the county for perk test instead of going through soil scientists because they're so backed up. So it kind of just depends on your timing. Sites that we think are marginal, and marginal is a, it's hard to tell. I mean, sites that appear to be wet, sites that don't have a lot of space available, sites that we think are going to be questionable or difficult to permit. More often than not, you're better off to have a soil scientist involved with those to start with, rather than going to the county. But it's just kind of site dependent on that.
What do you do if you've got like a current septic permit in hand, but it's a vacant lot and it's just been sitting there for a long time, and it's, I don't know, 5-10-year-old permit? What are the chances that land is not going to re-perk for future use? I mean, does it still behoove the buyer to get an updated perk test, or just use the one that's on file if you're running into like this time frame situation?
Yeah, very good question. So most of the time they do not change, most of the time. So if you have an expired permit, then I think it's a very good guidance document, but certainly it's not a permit any longer if it's expired. I would certainly encourage, if they can, to try to extend some time and get that permit, reissued so that you have a valid permit. And I think you have to use a little bit of common sense and judgment. What does the lot look like? If it doesn't appear that there's been any clearing done or no disturbance done, then you're probably fine. Where I find the biggest problems, and it's kind of a good lead in, I just had a personal friend of mine call me this week, and he was with a builder. And a developer had obtained improvement permits on these lots. And so this builder bought this lot in the subdivision with a valid improvement permit, a 5-bedroom improvement permit with a conventional system on it. And then so he's purchased the lot, got an improvement permit in hand. The developer had the lots cleared before he purchased it. And so the builder had nothing to do with the lot clearing. When he bought it, he had an improvement permit in hand and the lot had been cleared. So he goes to apply for a CA. Well, the health department goes out there and looks and says, yeah, this lot, I don't think we can do 5 bedrooms. We're going to back it down to 4 bedrooms. And then with more discussion, they were very concerned about it. So where he was landing was a 3-bedroom system with a different kind of system. And so he was asking me, I said, something's going on. So after doing a little bit of digging, what had happened is the developer had these lots cleared. And the clearing contractor had come in there and really done a number on these lots. They had root raked the lots. They had cut the soils down on these lots. So in essence, he was essentially voiding their permits. And that's a pretty big issue. So now you've got somebody that's bought a lot with an improvement permit in hand, and then somebody has changed the condition of that lot before they apply for the CA, and now your improvement permit is not valid any longer. So you certainly want to, if you're going to be doing any clearing, you want to make sure you have a contractor that's very familiar with septic, that is very careful around that septic area when they're doing clearing. And if you buy a lot that has an improvement permit on it, you just probably want to look at the dates. Look, how recently was it issued? How long has it been since it looks like work was done there? If it's fully wooded, you're probably fine. But those are just some things to think about. Does it look like this has been recently cleared? If you go out there and it looks cleared and it's raked and it's beautiful, it's going to look beautiful. But you don't know how much they've cut down, and you don't know what that may have done to that permit. We have found that more often than not, and it's very difficult. It's a hard lesson for builders to learn. They hire a clearing contractor to come in, and this builder didn't do it at the time; it was a developer. But a lot of times the builders do. They'll call us to install their septic. We go out there to look at it, and we look, and the lot's been cut down. They're halfway through building the home, and we're there to install a septic, and we know if we install this system, it's not going to perform right because the lot's 4 inches lower than where it was to begin with. So when I put these trenches in at 18 inches now, and the lot's been cut down, I'm 4 inches deeper than where I should have been to start with. So I'm going to be in that water table, and then the system is not going to function properly. So, we often get in a precarious situation because, we want the system to perform, but the builders have the lot cut down. So we have to have those conversations with the builders, and oftentimes we'll go back to see if we can modify the permit to do something more shallow or do something different.
That's a mess.
Yes, it is. It's a tough one. When he called me this week and we were explaining that, I said, what's changed on this? As I started digging and asking questions, well, the developer had the lot cleared, and I was like, oh, okay, well, and then we start digging, and it's that's a predicament. That's a tough
I think we might have had a couple questions here in our office.
When it comes to like the mound systems and basically the systems that you have to put into areas that don't have dirt that are as good as some other areas, what's typically the failure rate on those, and what's the requirement differences? Like, do different counties have inspection requirement differences or maintenance requirements? Does it vary from county to county? And like, is there anything that you have seen that would work for cases for like soil remediation? If somebody were to go out, do a perk test, look at something and say it's got to be a mound system or, you know, a low flow pipe system of some kind, is there anything they can do to help make the soil better before doing a septic? So kind of three questions.
Okay, so mound system. So first of all, back to the operator requirements. That's all state driven. That is all North Carolina statute state driven. So North Carolina Administrative Code governs that for the wastewater rules. And systems are classified by type, a type 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Those are Roman numerals. And so depending on the system classification dictates whether or not operator is required and what your operator requirements are. So a mound is not a system type per se. Your system types would be conventional, pump, LPP, anaerobic drip, aerobic drip, those kind of like that. So your system types would not. Now, if you had an LPP system in a mound, then you would have to have an operator because the LPP is driving the operator requirement. But if it was just a conventional system in a mound, no operator is required. And that's not going to vary from county to county. That's going to be a state requirement. As far as failure rates on mounds, I don't think the failure rates on mounds are any greater than failure rates in the ground. You know, you certainly have got hauled in a lot of dirt. There's a lot of fill material that's been put there as long as that fill material is good quality. And that fill material does have to be inspected by the county. When mounds are constructed, actually mounds are considered a site improvement. So if you have an improvement permit that's issued for a mound system or a fill system, you actually have to build and construct that mound, and it has to be approved by the county before they will issue your construction authorization to get building permits, which is a little odd. So, you know, if you've got a builder that wants to get started and they've got a system with a mound, we have to go out there, build that mound, get it inspected, and then we pull out, they build the home, and then when they get the home further along, then they call us and we come back and set tanks and install the system in the mound. But that mound is considered a site improvement, so it's prior to your construction authorization. Soil remediation, I'm not familiar with any of that. If you just cannot make sugar out of you know what. I mean, if it's not there, it's not there. And typically the reason for septic permitting unsuitable areas is you don't have enough space for your initial annual repair, or you don't have enough room for the to meet your setbacks, or your soil wetness condition is not, you don't have enough distance between your soil wetness condition and you know, it's too shallow, or something else I was going to say, or just the soils themselves, just the type and the granulation of the soils are not good. But you know, as far as, you know, why can't you dig those out and put good soils there? The rules just do not allow you to do that. That's sort of what a mound system does. You know, but the mound system is not really replacing the soils, but it's actually lifting everything up above that soil wetness condition. If you have a shallow water table, it's lifting it up above that. So that's how the mound system works. Did I get all your questions? I know you had a couple of them.
That was good.
Did you have a question?
I did. I think you may have just touched on it, but my question for you is there a statewide policy as far as perk tests and issuing septic permits, or does each county kind of up to their discretion? Yeah. It's by state? Yeah, that's what she said. State rule. Okay, sorry. I had to step out for a minute, so I missed that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
It's okay. He asked if it was by county or by state. And so we just told him that you said that.
Okay.
Anybody else here have any questions? Anybody at the coast?
When you have the mound system, can you bring in extra dirt to like kind of level out so you don't have that huge hump?
You can. That's a very good question. And we have people that do that, especially builders that are on their game and know what they're doing. We'll talk about that with them. Where's this mound going? Where's it going in relation to the home? Can I bring my home up a few blocks, you know, bring up a few more courses of block and then just put dirt between the house and the mound so it doesn't have this? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. It's more money, but it certainly makes it more aesthetically pleasing, you know, in the end. And then, you know, just even going a little bit beyond the mound and feathering it out some. So yes, you can.
So we're talking about just bringing in enough dirt basically to make the whole lot as high as the mound would be?
It depends, but yeah, because you certainly don't want water between the house and the mound. You want to make sure that you aren't channeling water.
What do you suggest? I just had a septic inspection come back, and it's a pump system, and they couldn't locate the D-box or the drain lines because of vegetation. To what degree do you get, I mean, obviously you can't drive over it with equipment to clear it out. Do you just what is your recommendation as far as clearing that off and then making it satisfiable to go back and get the next inspection? I mean, I'm still waiting on the seller to let me know if they're willing to do that, but to what degree do you have to maintain, the area so that doesn't happen?
Yeah, we see that a lot. We'll go to do an inspection and we just can't get to it. That's a hard one. I mean, it depends on how big the trees are. Sometimes you can do hand clearing. You can certainly do bush hogging and mowing if you have a tractor or something like that, or a track machine with a very low ground pressure because even when we backfill our systems, we're obviously running over them with equipment when we're backfilling them. But we use track machines with low ground pressure. So, if you have something small like that could potentially pluck these trees out, just pulling them out, if they've only gotten 3 or 4 inches in diameter, something like that. And then even mowing would probably be the best approach. And then just keep, just educating people on keeping them maintained. That's hard, but yeah, just, we've got one that we did here locally in Hampstead, and they're just azalea bushes. They were huge and they had overgrown it. And we just couldn't get up in there to identify the drain lines and inspect it. But they were beautiful azaleas, but we couldn't inspect their system because we just couldn't get to it because they were so big.
Okay, we got another question here.
Okay.
How difficult is it to expand a pre-existing system, in the event that someone wanted to put an addition onto a home or something of that nature? And how
difficult is it to expand a system?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you wanted to take a 3-bedroom home to a 4-bedroom home or something like that?
Correct.
You would have to go through permitting. So you'd have to get you a revised permit so that you had your, had the number of bedrooms or whatever reason you're expanding it for. And then if it just depends on how difficult it is. If it's just adding a line or two, it's typically not that difficult. We're going to be working alongside existing lines, so we have to be more careful. We're typically in a finished yard, so it takes a little bit more time there. Usually we would just find your existing D-box. We may not even add to that. We may just replace the D-box and plumb the new lines from there. Where you kind of get into more of a pinch is if it is a system that's going from 4 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms, because your tank size changes. Up to 4 bedrooms, it's a 1,000-gallon septic tank. When you go to a 5th bedroom, it's a 1,250-gallon septic tank. So then it's a bigger animal to figure out. You got to change your tank. Now in North Carolina, the rules will allow you to put 2 tanks in series to meet your volume, but there's some requirements around that. But most of the time you can make that work. So if there's space and we have that situation, oftentimes we'll go set a second septic tank. So you'll have your house plumbed to the first tank, the existing one. We'll set a new septic tank and the first one will run to the new one. And then we'll plumb out of the new one to your distribution box and your drain lines. So that's a little bit easier than pumping out the existing tank, trying to get that tank out of the ground and then putting a new 1,250-gallon tank in that same hole, which you may have to do if you don't have space. So it just kind of depends on the situation. But it's all going to be permit driven.
Thank you for that, Sonya. Appreciate it. Anybody have anything else?
What type of cost are we looking at if someone has a septic system that's just completely shot and they need to just start over and kind of rework it? Would that be the same pricing that you were given earlier, or would that, significantly up it because you got to remove and then replace?
No, I mean, again, you're going to be applying for a repair permit because if it's just a conventional system, you're going to be back at that conventional pricing that we were talking about. If it's, a pump system, then you're going to have to add the pump. The only thing that might drive it a little differently is you're probably, again, working in a finished yard, existing utilities that are going to be there, whether it's irrigation, power, driveways that you may not be able to go over because you don't want to crack them with tank trucks. So there are usually some things like that make those jobs a little bit more challenging and could add some cost to it. But, the system itself is probably not going to be any different.
Okay. Anybody else?
Question.
Go ahead, Travis.
Do you require a survey be done before you start putting a septic in?
That's a very good question. We first started installing septics. We made sure our builders had all their property surveyed before we installed septics, and because we need to know where the property corners are, et cetera. And we had a lot of problems with the builders pushing back on the cost associated with that. So we do not require that. We now do site visits before just about every install that we have. And when we do that, we meet a building superintendent out there, and we ensure that they can tell us where the property lines are, or they give us a foundation survey where the house is being constructed so I can pull off the house if I need to. We make sure that we have some known location or point of where we are on these lots so that we can ensure that we put these drain fields where they're supposed to go. When I'm looking at a septic permit, and this is maybe just also some food for thought, when you're looking at a permit, and it'll typically show you the tanks on the permit and it'll show you the drain fields. The drain fields cannot move. So I don't have the ability or the liberty to move that drain field 5 feet one way or the other just because it's convenient, or because there's a tree I want to save, or because the house was pushed back. I'd have to go back and get the county's approval to do that. The drain field, because that's all soil dependent, I'm putting it in a specific location where they tested those soils. So I can't move that. Tanks, on the other hand, they're just holding tanks. They're not in the soil. So if the plumber brings the plumbing out on the front of the home and we're going to be pumping it anyways, I can put the tanks wherever we'd like to. I just have to meet setbacks to property lines, to the foundation, to water lines, things like that. So if you get a permit for an existing system and it shows a tank in some location, that's not necessarily where it went, because that could be where they put it on the permit, but most counties do not do as-builts that show you exactly where the tanks and everything went. So just keep that in mind. Your drain field should be exactly where the permit shows it, but your tank might be in a slightly different location. But back to the surveys, we would love it if every builder would have their site surveyed before we installed. That'd be wonderful. It'd be a whole lot less problems and time consuming, but most of them will not spend the time or the expense to do that. So we end up making multiple site visits. We end up using a hodgepodge of, we found one property corner and we've got a foundation survey and we know the house is this far off of this, and start kind of backing into making sure we know where we're supposed to be putting it.
Builders not doing everything they should do. Who's surprised? A little bit of humor. Okay. Anybody have any other questions for Sonya? Well, Sonya, thank you so much for spending a good chunk of your morning with us. We really appreciate it. Some good insight on things that, I think septic for a lot of agents is like, yeah, I know what a septic is, but, that's about it. So it's good to understand the different types of systems and requirements so we can speak a little more knowledgeably about them, and have an expert to talk to when we need help.
Well, and I'm happy to help. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just your email or whatever in case we want to, your contact information.
Yep. You want me to give you that now? Or Doug, will you email that out?
I can send it out. And another thing I was going to ask Sonya is if you have like any information, I record these and store them on our agent resources page. Like if you've got any supplemental information, like in a PDF or something that just goes over your services or kind of the different types of systems or anything that you think would be beneficial and you want to pass that along, I'll add that as a supplement along with this for kind of posterity, or just anything you want to share, I can send out to the team along with your info.
Okay. All right. I don't know that I have anything. I do have some like little door hanger things that the state put out that's helpful on septic do's and don'ts that might be helpful for people to share with clients that have septic. But yeah, absolutely. And like I said, if you, I used to do a lot of these years ago when we first got into the business, just trying to help educate agents. And, the last thing you want as an agent is to sell a piece of property to someone and they not realize that they have, they've got an improvement permit, but it was for a $25,000 system that has to have an operator on it for the life of it. That's a tough situation to be in. So if you come across permits, you don't know what they are. Even my admin in my office here is still learning how to read permits because every county is different and the information is in a different place on every county's permit. So it's not like once you know how to read one, you can read them all. It's not necessarily that way, but I'm certainly happy to, if you shoot them over to me in email, I'll look at them. I'll be glad to talk to you about them. Whatever I can do to help, I'll be glad to. And then same thing with time of sales, if we can help you on that end with anything, or your repairs or permitting, however we can help, we'll be happy to.
Awesome. Fantastic. I will send out Sonya's information when I send out, when I get the video uploaded, and send the link to you guys for the recap.
All right.
All right. Sonya, thanks again so much. We really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invite.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to everybody. Y'all have a great day.
Bye.